For this video, let's see how we can create dynamic structured references in Excel. Structured references are exclusive to data tables in Excel. You can tell whether a table is a proper data table in Excel by clicking in the table and then looking for the table design ribbon. If you have the table design ribbon, you have a proper upgraded data table. In this case, I have a proper table named test data. Now, what I mean by a dynamic structured reference is if we were to create a simple formula like equals, and then point to one of those tables' column headers, in this case department, we get what's called a structured reference. So instead of it saying B2, it says go to the test data table and give me the department field. Likewise, if I were to click above the word salary, it says go to the test data table and give me the salary field. But what if I want the user to be able to choose the column that they want, not have that column be hard-coded in a formula? What we need to do is we need to take this part and make it dynamic, so that we go to the test data table, but then whichever column the user selects. Now I've built a data validation drop-down list here in cell B6 so the user can choose from name, department, position, or salary. And whichever one of those categories they choose, I want the corresponding data for that column to be displayed. So if they choose name, I want it to say Fred. If they choose position, I want it to say manager. Now we can't just say equals and point to B6 and hit enter because we'll just get whatever is in B6. So we're going to use a little known and very underutilized function in Excel called indirect. The way indirect works is my brain almost thinks it should be called redirect. Because if I were to go to a cell and type in B2, then in another cell type in indirect, and then point to, in this case, E8, when I hit enter, I get sales. Because what indirect is being told to do is go to cell E8 and then do whatever is there. In this case, there's a reference to B2, so this cell ends up going to cell E8 to then be redirected to B2. So you're getting to B2 indirectly through E8. So let's use the indirect function here in cell B8. So we'll say equals indirect. Now we want to point to the table column heading. So we'll have to put the name of the table, test data, then square brackets. But here it's expecting a field name or a column from the table. I want it to take whatever the user chose in B6. So if I were to type in B6, close bracket, close parentheses, when I hit enter, this doesn't work because test data B6 is not a valid location. So here's how we're going to overcome this. We're going to take the part of the structured reference that never changes and enclose it in double quotes. So the parts that never change is the table name opening square bracket and the closing square bracket. It's the part in the middle that needs to be dynamic. So we're going to concatenate the first part of the table name to whatever's in B6 to then a closed bracket. So you can see it up here in the formula bar a little bit easier. Now when we hit enter, we get Fred. If I were to change the drop down to department, we'll get sales. Position, we'll get manager. Salary, we get 100,000. So we're indirectly accessing the test data table in whatever column B6 is displaying. Now let's look at a practical application of using indirect to create dynamic structured references. I've got a table here where I want the user to be able to choose from one of the 4 categories: division, region, product, purchaser. But I also want the user to be able to choose from one of the 3 metrics: cost, sales, and profit. So to create an aggregated report based on the selected category and the selected metric, I'm going to use the new group by function. Now, as of the recording of this video in January 2024, group by is still a function in development, but it should be released anytime now. But even if you don't have the group by function, you'll still be able to apply this technique for other situations. So I'm going to start off with equals group by. What will make up the rows of this group will be an indirect reference to one of these 4 categories in the blue table that I've named data. So I'm going to use the indirect function. Now remember, in double quotes, I'm going to point to the data table, open bracket, double quotes, and then concatenate that to cell M1 because this is the cell that holds the user's choice. Then we need to concatenate that to the close square brackets. Close parentheses for the indirect, comma. Now the column we're going to aggregate also needs to be an indirect selection. So we'll use another indirect, pointed to the data table, open bracket, concatenated to the selection made by the user in cell P1, and of course concatenated to a closing square bracket, comma. The function we're going to use to aggregate by will be sum, comma. We have a header row in the table, but we're not going to show it, comma. And we don't want to show any totals, close parentheses. And when we hit enter, here's our table of aggregated categories. So to test this, if I were to go up and change purchaser to region, Now we have aggregations based on region. Same thing for division, purchaser, product. If we were to change the metric from sales to profit, now we have the profit for each product, or we could have the cost of each product. Changing the metric and then going back and changing the category, now we can see the profit by division, by region, by product, and by purchaser. Now I'm going to add one extra little bit of cleverness to this. I would like this table to be sorted in descending order. So I'm going to go up to the group by function and wrap it inside of a sort function. So the sort function is going to use the entire output of group by as the array to be sorted, comma. Which column are we going to sort by? Well, in this case, our output table only has 2 columns, category and metric, and I want to sort by the metric column. So we'll choose the second column to sort by, and we want to sort in descending order, which would be -1. Close parentheses, enter, and so now we're sorted in descending order. I can change this from purchaser to division, I can change this from profit to sales, and we're sorting sales in descending order by division. So the data here could be in some sort of back-end sheet that the user doesn't see, but this table could be on a dashboard. Now speaking of a dashboard, this table could be hidden from the user, and this table, instead of being the end result, could just be a data preparation table for a chart. So we could take these results and feed it to this chart object. So now when the user goes up and chooses a different category, like purchaser, we can now see sales by purchaser, or sales by region. We could change our metric to profit, and see our profit by region, or we can see our profit by product. So our data table here that uses structured references can be indirectly referenced in a group by function that produces sorted output, which then feeds a chart. We use data validation drop-down lists to let the user pick specific categories or metrics, to update that data preparation table to again feed the chart. This file is available via a download link in the video description. So what do you think about the indirect function? Have you ever even heard of it? Most people haven't, but here we're using it creatively to allow users to pick specific columns from a proper data table. Thank you for taking the time to watch. And remember, at BCTI, the learning never stops.